Welcome to National Narrative. My name is Jordan M. Kersey, and you are about to watch a specially made video presentation about the history of the nation of Brazil. Now, this video can be a little lengthy, so if you ever need to watch the specific parts of the history of Brazil, you can do that because I made this presentation to be divided into chapters. Now, I hope you enjoy. Brazil occupies a large area along the eastern coast of South America and includes much of the continent's interior. It shares a border with every South American country except Ecuador and Chile. Brazil is the fifth largest country in the world, with a total area of 8.5 million kilometers squared. Brazil is the only country in the world that has the equator and the Tropic of Capricorn running through it. Brazil's most significant mountain ranges include the Mantiqueira and Espinhaço Mountains and the Serra do Mar. Brazil's major rivers include the Amazon, the Paraná, and its major tributary, the Iguaçu, which includes the Iguaçu Falls, the Negro, São Francisco, Xingu, Madeira, and Tapajós rivers. The Amazon forest is the largest forest formation on the planet and is equivalent to 35% of the forest areas of the planet. Within that, there is about 55,000 different species of plants populating it. The Cerrado presents diverse regions, ranging from clean fields devoid of woody vegetation to dense tree formations. The Cerrado is made up of grasslands, savannas, and dry forests, and is located in the highlands of central Brazil. The Atlantic forest is composed of a series of ecosystems with very different structures and composition of flowers, having as a common element the exposure to the humid winds that blow from the ocean. The Caatinga has dry soil and its vegetation is formed by palm trees. Much of its northeastern part suffers a high risk of desertification due to the degradation of vegetation cover and soil. The Pampa is characterized by the Gaucho plains and plateaus and open savanna vegetation. The Pantanal is an alluvial plain influenced by rivers that drain the basin of the upper Paraguay, where it develops a fauna and flora of rare beauty and abundance. Did you know the Amazon River is the world's largest river by volume of water discharged? Around 209,000 cubic meters per second flow into the Atlantic Ocean. During the wet season, the river is up to 30 miles wide. The population of Brazil is approximately 210 million people, and 84% of the population is defined as urban. In 2008, the illiteracy rate was 11%. As of 2008, 48% of the population described themselves as white, 44% as pardo or brown, and 7% as black. As of the year 2000, 74% of the population followed Roman Catholicism, 15% Protestantism, and 7% have no religion. The official language of Brazil is Portuguese. Minority languages are spoken throughout the nation. 180 American Indian languages are spoken in remote areas, and a significant number of other languages are spoken by immigrants and their descendants. In 2007, the National Indian Foundation estimated that Brazil has 67 different uncontacted tribes. Did you know learning at least one second language, generally English or Spanish, is mandatory for all the 12 grades of the mandatory education system? Brazil is the first country in South America to offer Esperanto to secondary students. The land now called Brazil was claimed for the Portuguese Empire on April 22, 1500, with the arrival of the Portuguese fleet commanded by Pedro Álvares Cabral. The Portuguese encountered indigenous peoples divided into several tribes, most of whom spoke languages of the Tupi and Guarani family, and fought amongst themselves. Though the first settlement was founded in 1532, colonization effectively began in 1534, when King John III of Portugal divided the territory into the 15 private and autonomous captaincy colonies of Brazil. However, the decentralized and unorganized tendencies of the captaincy colonies proved problematic, and in 1549 the Portuguese king restructured them into the Governorate General of Brazil, a single and centralized Portuguese colony in South America. In the first 2 centuries of colonization, indigenous and European groups lived in constant war, establishing opportunistic alliances in order to gain advantages against each other. By the mid-16th century, cane sugar had become Brazil's most important export, and slaves purchased in sub-Saharan Africa, in the slave market of Western Africa, not only those from Portuguese allies of their colonies in Angola and Mozambique had become its largest import. To cope with plantations of sugarcane, due to increasing international demand for Brazilian sugar, Did you know Brazil is one of the world's most biodiverse countries with a total of 4 million plant and animal species according to estimates? Brazil has more species of monkey than any other nation. In late 1807, Spanish and Napoleonic forces threatened the security of continental Portugal, causing Prince Regent João, in the name of Queen Maria I, to move the royal court from Lisbon to Rio de Janeiro. There they established some of Brazil's first financial institutions, such as its local stock exchanges and its national bank. Additionally, ending the Portuguese monopoly on Brazilian trade and opening Brazil to other nations. In 1809, in retaliation for being forced into exile, the Prince Regent ordered the Portuguese conquest of French Guiana. With the end of the Peninsular War in 1814, the courts of Europe demanded that Queen Maria I and Prince Regent João return to Portugal, deeming it unfit for the head of an ancient European monarchy to reside in a colony. In 1815, to justify continuing to live in Brazil, where the royal court had thrived for 6 years, the crown established the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves, thus creating a pluricontinental transatlantic monarchic state. However, the leadership in Portugal, resentful of the new status of its larger colony, continued to demand the return of court to Lisbon. In 1821, acceding to the demands of revolutionaries who had taken the city of Porto, Dom John VI departed for Lisbon. There he swore an oath to the new constitution, leaving a son, Prince Pedro de Alcantara, as regent of the Kingdom of Brazil. Did you know the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro weighs 635 tons. It is 38 meters high, including its pedestal, and was named one of the new 7 Wonders of the World in 2007. Tensions between Portuguese and Brazilians increased, and the Portuguese Cortes, guided by the new political regime imposed by the 1820 Liberal Revolution, tried to re-establish Brazil as a colony. The Brazilians refused to yield, and Prince Pedro decided to stand with them, declaring the country's independence from Portugal on September 7, 1822. A month later, Prince Pedro was declared the first Emperor of Brazil, with the royal title of Dom Pedro I, resulting in the foundation of the Empire of Brazil. The Brazilian War of Independence, which had already begun along this process, spread through the northern and northeastern regions and in Cisplatina province. The last Portuguese soldiers surrendered on March 8, 1824. Portugal officially recognized Brazil on August 29, 1825. Almost immediately after Brazil won its independence, Brazil had the Cisplatin War, in which the southern part of Brazil fought for and won independence as the new nation of Uruguay. On April 7, 1831, worn down by years of administrative turmoil and political dissent, Pedro I went to Portugal to reclaim his daughter's crown, abdicating the Brazilian throne in favor of his 5-year-old son and heir, who thus became the empire's second monarch, with the royal title of Dom Pedro II. As the new emperor could not exert his constitutional powers until he came of age, a regency was set up by the National Assembly. In the absence of a charismatic figure who could represent a moderate face of power, during this period of a series of localized rebellions took place. This emerged from the dissatisfaction of the provinces with central power, coupled with old and latent social tensions peculiar to a vast slaveholding and newly independent nation-state. This period of internal political and social upheaval was overcome only at the end of the 1840s, years after the end of the Regency, which occurred with the premature coronation of Pedro II in 1841. During the next several years of Dom Pedro's reign, domestic affairs focused on the issue of slavery, while foreign affairs focused on the issues with Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina. The Atlantic slave trade was abandoned in 1850 as a result of the British naval blockades of Africa. Long after the Cisplatin War, that resulted in independence for Uruguay, Brazil won 3 international wars. These were the Platin War, the Uruguayan War, and the devastating Paraguayan War, the largest war effort in Brazilian history. Only in May 1888, after a long process of internal mobilization and debate for an ethical and legal dismantling of slavery in the country, was slavery formally abolished. Although there was no desire among the majority of Brazilians to change the country's form of government, on November 15, 1889, in attrition with the majority of army officers, as well as with rural and financial elites for different regions, the monarchy was overthrown by a military coup. After the coup d'etat, Brazil's first republic was established. Since then, 15 November is now a national holiday called Republic Day. Did you know Brazil produces around 40% of the world's coffee production? Brazil by far is the world's largest producer of coffee. The early Republican government was nothing more than a military dictatorship, with army dominating affairs both in Rio de Janeiro and in the States. Freedom of the press disappeared and elections were controlled by those in power. Not until 1894, following an economic crisis and a military one, did civilians take power, remaining there until October 1930. If in relation to its foreign policy, the country in this first Republican period maintained a relative balance characterized by a success in resolving foreign and domestic disputes. However, the balance was only broken by the Acre War, Brazil's involvement in World War I, various rebellions that brought on a prolonged cycle of financial, political, and social instability. Did you know samba is a Brazilian music genre and a dance style? Samba is recognized around the world as an icon of Brazilian national identity. The National Samba Day is celebrated on December 2nd. Little by little, a cycle of general instability undermined the regime to such an extent that Getulio Vargas, supported by most of the military, successfully led the October 1930 coup. Vargas and the military were supposed to assume power temporarily, but instead closed the Congress, extinguished the Constitution, ruled with emergency powers, and replaced the state's governors with their own supporters. In the 1930s, 3 failed attempts to remove Vargas and his supporters from power occurred. The 1935 uprising created a security crisis in which the Congress transferred more power to the executive. The 1937 coup d'etat resulted in the cancellation of the 1938 election, formalized Vargas as dictator, beginning the Estado Novo era, which was noted for government brutality and censorship of the press. Brazil remained neutral in World War II until August 1942, when the country entered on the Allied side after suffering retaliation by Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy in a strategic dispute over the South Atlantic. In addition to its participation in the Battle of the Atlantic, Brazil also sent an expeditionary force to fight in the Atlantic Campaign. With the Allied victory in 1945 and the end of Nazi fascist regimes in Europe, Vargas's position became unsustainable, and he was swiftly overthrown in another military coup, with democracy reinstated by the same army that had ended it 15 years earlier. Did you know a number of Nazis fled to Brazil after the Second World War, including Joseph Mengele? Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death, was known for his cruel experiments and fascination with twins. Juscelino Kubitschek became president in 1956 and assumed a conciliatory posture towards the political opposition that allowed him to govern without major crises. The economy and industrial sector grew remarkably, but his greatest achievement was the construction of the new capital city of Brasilia, inaugurated in 1960. In 1964, there was a coup that resulted in another military regime. The new regime became a full dictatorship in 1968. Oppression reached institutional opponents, artists, journalists, and other members of civil society. Despite its brutality, like other authoritarian regimes, due to an economic boom known as an economic miracle, the regime reached a peak in popularity in the early 1970s. Slowly, however, the wear and tear of years of dictatorial power led to the eventual rise of civilian rule. With the enactment of the Amnesty Law in 1979, Brazil began a slow return to democracy, which was completed during the 1980s. Civilians returned to power in 1985 when José Sarney assumed the presidency. He became unpopular during his tenure through failure to control the economic crisis and hyperinflation he inherited from the military regime. Sarney's unsuccessful government led to the election in 1989 of the almost unknown Fernando Collor, subsequently impeached by the National Congress in 1992. Collor was succeeded by his vice president, Itamar Franco, who appointed Fernando Henrique Cardoso Minister of Finance. In 1994, Cardoso produced a highly successful Plano Real that, after decades of failed economic plans made by previous governments attempting to curb hyperinflation, finally stabilized the Brazilian economy. Cardoso won the 1994 election and again in 1998. Did you know Oscar Niemeyer, the chief architect of Brazilia's public buildings, has designed more than 500 structures, most of which can be found in Brazil? The distinctive Cathedral of Brasilia is one of the most famous. Brazil officially adopted this design for its national flag on November 19, 1889. The flag of Brazil is known as the green and yellow. The flag is green, which is symbolic of Brazil's lush fields and forests. Its primary feature is a large yellow diamond, symbolic of Brazil's wealth and gold, and in its center floats a blue celestial globe. Each star represents one of the 27 states of Brazil. The motto in the center means order and progress. The peaceful transition of power from Cardoso to his main opposition leader, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, elected in 2002 and re-elected in 2006, was seen as proof that Brazil had achieved a long-sought political stability. However, sparked by indignation and frustrations accumulated over decades from corruption, police brutality, inefficiencies of the political establishment, and public service, numerous peaceful protests erupted in Brazil from the middle of the first term of Dilma Rousseff, who had succeeded Lula after winning election in 2010. Enhanced by political and economic crises with evidence of involvement by politicians from all the primary political parties and several bribery and tax evasion schemes. With large street protests for and against her, Rousseff was impeached by the Brazilian Congress in 2016. In 2018, 62% of the population on a poll claimed that corruption was Brazil's biggest problem. The most popular sport in Brazil is football. The Brazilian men's national team is ranked among the best in the world according to the FIFA World Rankings and has won the World Cup tournament a record 5 times. The Brazil men's national volleyball team currently holds the titles of the World League, World Grand Champions Cup, World Championship, and the World Cup. In martial arts, Brazilians developed capoeira, vale tudo, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Brazil has hosted several high-profile international sporting events, like the 1950 FIFA World Cup, and recently has hosted the 2014 FIFA World Cup. Rio de Janeiro was selected to host the 2016 Olympic Games, making it the first South American city to host the Games. The Brazilian Space Agency is the civilian authority in Brazil responsible for the country's space program. It operates a spaceport at Alcântara and a rocket launch site at Beira do Inferno. The agency has given Brazil a role in space in South America and made Brazil a former partner for cooperation in the International Space Station. The Brazilian Space Agency is the heir to Brazil's space program. Previously, the program had been under the control of the Brazilian military. The program was transferred into the civilian control on February 10, 1994. It suffered a major setback in 2003 when a rocket explosion killed 21 technicians. Brazil successfully launched its first rocket into space on October 23, 2004, from the Alcântara Launch Center. It was a VSB-30 launched on a suborbital mission. Several other successful launches have followed. On March 30, 2006, AEB astronaut Marcos Pontes became the first Brazilian and the first native Portuguese-speaking person to go into space, where he stayed on the International Space Station for a week. The Brazilian Space Agency has pursued a policy of joint technological development with more advanced space programs. Initially, it relied heavily on the United States, but after meeting difficulties from them on technological transfers, Brazil has branched out, working with other nations, including China, India, Russia, and Ukraine. Did you know over 60% of Brazil's energy sources come from hydroelectric dams? Brazil has the largest installed hydropower capacity in South America and comprises 2/3 of the continent's installed capacity. Thank you for watching my video. Feel free to subscribe, comment, and share. Next week you can look forward to my specially made video on the history of the nation of India. Until then, catch you later.